चढ़दीकला टाइम टीवी नॉर्थ अमेरिका देख रहे सारे दर्शकों का वर्ल्ड पंजाबी न्यूज़ दे विच स्वागत है। मैं तुहाडे नाल रिदम। खबरां की शुरुआत करन तो पहले एक नज़र मारदे हां कुछ खास हैडलाइंस ते। कोविड-19 तो दुनिया नूं बचाउण लई कैनेडा भी करेगा 13 मिलियन वैक्सीन दान। G7 मुल्कां दी होई मीटिंग च लिया गया फैसला। अंतरराष्ट्रीय विकास मंत्री करीना गाउडलर ने दी जानकारी। मूल वासियों ਲਈ कनेडा सरकार ने पासपोर्टां ते होर सरकारी दस्तावेजां ते अपने नाम बदली दी अर्जी नूं दित्ती मंजूरी। नागरिक मंत्री मार्को वल्लों दित्ती गई जानकारी। क्यूबिक सरकार वालों ट्रक ड्राइवर जतिंदर सिंह नूं देश निकाले दा मिलिया हुक्म। गैर कानूनी तौर उत्ते देश च रहन दे लगे इल्जाम। जतिंदर सिंह दे हक च सड़कां ते उत्तर देश निकाले दी रोक दी सरकार तो कीती लोकां ने मंग। ते हुण खबरां विस्तार नाल। G7 मुल्कां दी होई मीटिंग तो बाद यह फैसला किया गया है कि कोविड-19 तो दुनिया नूं बचाउण लई वध तों वध मदद की जावे ते इस फैसले अनुसार कनेडा भी 13 मिलियन वैक्सीन दान करेगा। जानकारी दिंदे अंतरराष्ट्रीय विकास मंत्री करीना गाउडलर का कहना है कि 4 मिलियन डोजेस दा तुरंत ही वंडियां जाणगियां।
Yeah, so we are donating, as you said, 13 million doses, about 1.4 million of the Janssen vaccine, just over 7 million of Novavax, and just over 4 million of the AstraZeneca vaccine. These are all doses that we have purchased through COVAX that would have been destined for Canada, but that we are donating back to COVAX so that they can be distributed. The AstraZeneca vaccines will happen in the immediacy, as those vaccines are currently being distributed by COVAX, and the J&J and Novavax vaccines will happen as they come online through production. Well, it will be contingent on production. I mean, as we know, there have been some vaccine manufacturers that have been able to ramp up production faster than others, and so it's kind of as soon as those vaccines are produced, they'll go into the COVAX facility. Well, so from Canada's perspective, we've been very clear that as excess doses are available, we would be donating them. And so these 13 million are excess to the needs that we have in Canada right now. And so that's why we made the decision for these 13 million. As we continue moving through our vaccine program here in Canada and more vaccines come online through bilateral deals that we've entered into, there's very much a possibility that we'll be donating even more vaccines into the future. So as the Prime Minister said on Sunday, this is very much a first step in terms of our vaccine donation to developing countries.
फैडरल सरकार ने सोमवार ਨੂੰ घोषणा की कि कनेडा के मूल निवासी लोग हुण पासपोर्टां ते होर सरकारी दस्तावेजां ते अपने रिवायती नामां ते मुड़ दावा करन लई अर्जी दे सकदे ने। यह कदम 2015 च सच्चाई ते मेल मिलाप कमीशन की कार्रवाई के सद्दे दे जवाब विच आया है। नागरिकता मंत्री मार्को ने कहा कि नाम बदलन की प्रक्रिया लई सारियां फीसां भी मुआफ कीतियां जाणगियां।
Today, we take one more step together by responding to Call to Action 17. Which will allow residential school survivors and their families to reclaim their names on their passports and other travel documents. Names that had been stolen from them by the residential schools. Our names are among the first things we individualize, unique. They speak to our past, honoring those who came before us, and reflect our family's history. Naming children is a profoundly important tradition across many different cultures and communities. The traditional names given to Indigenous children carry deep cultural meaning. Yet for many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, colonialism has robbed them of these sacred names. Indigenous children, stolen from their families to be forced into the residential school system, had even their very names stolen from them, as the testimonials of the survivors, which are contained in the TRC final report, lay out in painful detail.
क्यूबिक सरकार वालों ट्रक ड्राइवर जतिंदर सिंह नूं देश निकाले दा हुक्म दिता गया है क्योंकि उन्हां उत्ते गैर कानूनी तौर उत्ते रहन दे इल्जाम ने। सरकार दे इस फैसले ने जतिंदर सिंह उत्ते मुसीबतां दा पहाड़ तोड़ दिता है। बेशक सरकार सख्ती वरत रही है, पर आम लोग ट्रक ड्राइवर जतिंदर सिंह दे हक विच नित्तर आए ने ते मंग कर रहे ने कि सरकार उन्हां नूं देश निकाला ना देवे।
Here have done, which is come and try to make a better life for ourselves, try to make a home for ourselves. That is all Jatinder wants.
When I go back to India, so I don't know what happened for me. So because my dad is involved for a political party and another opposition party, and I just like dangerous my life over there.
So how can we accept that our government will send someone to a place where the situation is out of control?
And Mr. Singh is an essential worker. He was a truck driver during the pandemic, so he did a lot of work and helped a lot of people with this job.
And the original reason that he came to Canada as a political refugee is still very much there. So I see this literally as a life and death situation for him.
We expected that, but the only reason why we go to it is so we can then escalate and go to federal court.
Mr. Blair have the power to stop the deportation, to give Mr. Singh time to present his case with the help of a proper law.
ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਆਰਮਡ ਫੋਰਸਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਇਨ ਕਮਾਂਡ ਲੈਫਟੀਨੈਂਟ ਜਨਰਲ ਮਾਈਕਲ ਰੂਲੋ ਆਪਣਾ ਅਹੁਦਾ ਛੱਡ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਜਿਨਸੀ ਦੋਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਚੱਲਦਿਆਂ ਜਾਂਚ ਦਾ ਸਾਹਮਣਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਜਨਰਲ ਜੋਨਾਥਨ ਵੈਸ ਨਾਲ ਗੋਲਫ ਖੇਡਣ ਕਾਰਨ ਚਰਚਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਏ ਰੂਲੋ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। CAF ਮੈਂਬਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਅਸਤੀਫੇ ਲਈ ਲਿਖੇ ਪੱਤਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈਫਟੀਨੈਂਟ ਜਨਰਲ ਮਾਈਕਲ ਰੂਲੇ ਨੇ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਸਵੀਕਾਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਵੈਸ ਤੇ ਵਾਈਸ ਐਡਮਿਰਲ ਕ੍ਰੇਨਜ਼ ਬੇਨਜ਼ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਰਾਇਲ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਨੇਵੀ ਦੇ ਹੈੱਡ ਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੋਲਡ ਖੇਡਣ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਗਲਤ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਂਚ ਪ੍ਰਕਿਰਿਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਰਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਨੂੰ ਵੱਡਾ ਝਟਕਾ ਤੇ ਖੋਰਾ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਫੌਜੀ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਅਸਤੀਫੇ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਪ੍ਰਤੀਕਿਰਿਆਵਾਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ।
Is there no morals? Is there no integrity? Is there no duty that anybody's respecting anymore? I felt before that I wasn't going to get justice, and now that confirms it to me.
It shows very poor judgment and sends entirely the wrong message to the whole country.
I think it's very appropriate for him to resign.
It's beyond a conflict of interest. It's really, I just think a display of invincibility.
There is zero leadership from Justin Trudeau and Minister Sajjan. That is setting a tone of no accountability.
ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਦੇ ਐਸੋਸੀਏਟ ਮੈਡੀਕਲ ਅਧਿਕਾਰੀ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਯਾਫੀ ਨੇ ਸੂਬੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਦੀ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਸਮੇਂ 400 ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਕਰੋਨਾ ਮਰੀਜ਼ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਹਸਪਤਾਲਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ICU ਵਿੱਚ ਭਰਤੀ ਨੇ। ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਟੈਸਟਿੰਗ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਫਿਲਹਾਲ 2.8% ਦੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਨੇ।
And 1,078 cases 2 weeks ago. Sadly, we are reporting an additional 30 deaths since Thursday's update. This includes 4 COVID-19 related deaths today, bringing the 7-day average to 13, which is down slightly from 16 last week. We continue to extend our deepest sympathies to the families, friends, and caregivers of those who have passed away from COVID-19, and to everyone mourning the death of a loved one. The number of hospitalizations and ICU patients continues to show steady improvement. Today, we have approximately 430 people in hospital, although this is not an exact number, as we know that several hospitals did not report over the weekend. The number of people in ICU reported by the ministry today is 409. We know that some of these individuals are from Manitoba, and they are being cared for in Ontario hospitals. So the number of Ontarians in the ICU is below 400.
ਮਿਲਟਨ ਤੋਂ MPP ਪਰਮ ਗਿੱਲ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਅਦਾਰੇ ਖੋਲ੍ਹਣ ਦਾ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਲਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਲੋਕ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਛੋਟੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਅਦਾਰਿਆਂ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਦੇ ਐਸੋਸੀਏਟ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਰੈਪਿਡ ਟੈਸਟਿੰਗ ਲਈ ਕੀ ਕਦਮ ਚੁੱਕ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਇਸ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੰਦਿਆਂ ਪ੍ਰਭਮੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਰਕਾਰੀਆ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਸੰਸਥਾਵਾਂ ਸਿਟੀ ਕਾਉਂਸਲਰਸ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ ਸਭ ਦੀ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਲਈ ਕਦਮ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ।
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Associate Minister of Small Businesses and Red Tape Reduction. Minister, we know that small businesses are the backbone of the economy, the heart of our local communities, and will be key to restoring confidence in a safer return to in-person commercial activity. With Ontario taking the first step on the roadmap to reopen on Friday, can the Minister tell this House how the government is using rapid testing as a tool to keep small business employees, customers, and communities at large safe? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for Milton for that question and his steadfast support of small businesses during this pandemic. Speaker, Ontario has been a national leader in the deployment of rapid tests, and we've managed our supply of rapid tests to ensure ongoing availability for organizations and businesses across the province. We know that rapid tests can prevent workplace outbreaks from otherwise asymptomatic employees and keep our hardworking businesses open. That's why we have partnered with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, their chamber affiliates, municipalities across the province to introduce more the COVID-19 rapid screening initiative. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to report that less than a month after the launch of this program, Ontario has shipped over 2.4 million rapid tests into these chambers and communities across the province. I look forward to continue working with these chambers and municipalities to deploy more tests.
ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਤੋਂ ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਮੁੜ ਲੌਂਗ ਟਰਮ ਕੇਅਰਸ ਹੋਮ ਦਾ ਮਸਲਾ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਬੰਧਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਖਾਮੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਮੌਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨੇ, ਪਰ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਮਸਲਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਬਹਿਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝਿਆ ਗਿਆ। ਸਾਰਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਦਾਅਵਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ 40% ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਫੈਸਿਲਿਟੀਆਂ ਅਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ 에ਅਰ ਕੰਡੀਸ਼ਨਿੰਗ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਸਵਾਲ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੰਦਿਆਂ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਲੀਡਰ ਨੇ ਦਾਅਵਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਸੁਧਾਰ ਕੀਤੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੀ ਕਦਮ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ।
I'd just like to start off by also echoing the comments made by the leader of the official opposition this morning at beginning of question period and welcome the members of the Ontario Federation of Labour who have filled our virtual galleries for today's proceeding. Speaker, nearly 4,000 seniors and staff lost their lives in long-term care. There was no emergency debate for that. The Canadian Armed Forces released their report in May of 2020 outlining the crisis in long-term care. The government didn't think that it was an exceptional priority to debate that crisis and address it at that time. Speaker, as of today, 46% of our homes, long-term care homes, still do not provide air conditioning to residents in their rooms as we prepare for a sweltering summer. That should be a priority for this government, but it's not. No emergency debate to help manage the ongoing staffing crisis in long-term care. Speaker, this government needs to get its priorities straight.
Question.
Speaker, can the Premier explain to families and residents of long-term care why ramming through undemocratic changes to the Election Finances Act is more important than protecting seniors in long-term care in the province of Ontario?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, in fact, there actually have been two debates with respect to the use of emergency powers in this province, Mr. Speaker. The Solicitor General, as well as the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the Minister of Health have appeared in front of a committee with respect to the COVID-19 response and the emergency powers that are within that, Mr. Speaker. I note that, of course, prior to the pandemic, we were talking about long-term care, unlike the opposition. That was not. We said that we needed to build 30,000 new long-term care beds, Mr. Speaker. We did that, Mr. Speaker. We are well on our way to building 30,000 new spaces. We said that we had to have more PSWs. That's why we're hiring over 27,000 additional PSWs. We said that our homes needed to be air conditioned, Mr. Speaker. That is why we are progressing and have almost completed that work, Mr. Speaker. We are hiring 2,000 new nurses, Speaker. 4 hours of care, Mr. Speaker. On every single measure before, during, and certainly after, we will continue to focus on long-term care, continue to focus on the priorities of Ontario.
ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਈਸਟ ਤੋਂ ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਗੁਰਰਤਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਬਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਰੱਖੇ ਗਏ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਮੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਸਟਮੈਟਿਕ ਸੁਧਾਰ ਕੀਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਰੇਸਿਜ਼ਮ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਕਿਆ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ। ਗੁਰਰਤਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਲੰਡਨ ਦੀ ਘਟਨਾ ਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇਸਲਾਮੋਫੋਬੀਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਤਵਾਦੀ ਹਮਲਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਠੋਸ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ।
Thank you, Speaker. The issue of anti-Asian hate is an incredibly important issue. And this is an issue that has impacted, we've seen the impact of this hate across North America. And it is such a pervasive kind of hate, and we've seen in the context of COVID-19, it's become more pervasive across the province. We've seen the tragic lives that have been lost unjustly so, inspired by this hate-filled rhetoric and belief towards people from Asian community. I actually had the benefit of recently speaking to a group of students about the impacts of anti-Asian hate. And as someone of Asian background, I shared my own stories, my own experiences of growing up and facing a lot of bullying. Growing up and facing and feeling the sense that I didn't belong because of who I was, because of my heritage, because of my background. And there's a lot of ways that impacted me. The anxiety that it would create, the stress that it would create. And I think that's why it's so important that we need to recognize that though I did experience a degree of racism, there are those who experience far more negative consequences as a result of this hate. And that's why it's so important that each and every one of us speak unequivocally against anti-Asian hate. And each and every one of us understand that we have a responsibility in acknowledging the impacts of anti-Asian hate. And also, beyond that, go further and start looking at it. And this is a conversation that has come out now with respect to the really terrible and tragic terrorist attack that had happened in London, and that was fueled by a variety of forms of hatred and bigotry. But what people are calling for now, more than ever, is systemic change. We're calling for systemic change, and that's what people want from government. It's so important that we unequivocally condemn forms of hate. And that's something that we need words in that respect. But we can't have just words. If we are limited to just words, then we do a disservice towards those who are victims of hate. And that's why people are calling for systemic change to combat all forms of hatred, and including anti-Asian hate. And since this is my first time rising, Speaker, and it is very applicable to the conversation that we're having, the debate we're having right now, I do want to take a moment to address the terrible terrorist attack towards the family in London, the Asfal family. And to think that a family that was going for a stroll was then victim to a terrorist attack that killed 4 out of 5 family members, leaving a 9-year-old boy with serious conditions who's going to wake up and realize that his whole family was taken away from him just because they were Muslim.
ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਦੀਪਕ ਆਨੰਦ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਹਾਊਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਮੁਲਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਯੋਗ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਆਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਸਿਰਫ 2% ਹੀ ਖੂਨਦਾਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਲੋੜਾਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਪੈਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਆਨੰਦ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਰਾਈਡਿੰਗ ਮਿਸੀਸਾਗਾ ਮਾਲਟਨ ਵਿੱਚ 16 ਤੇ 23 ਜੂਨ ਨੂੰ ਖੂਨਦਾਨ ਕੈਂਪ ਲਗਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਖੂਨਦਾਨ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਅਪੀਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਤੇ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਵਰਲਡ ਬਲੱਡ ਡੋਨਰ ਡੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਵਧਾਈਆਂ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ।
Member statements. The member for Mississauga Malton.
Mr. Speaker, over the last few months, while hard-working Ontarians across the province have been rolling up their sleeve to receive the vaccine, many of them have also been rolling up their sleeve for an equally important life-saving reason. June 14th is World Blood Donor Day, a day to raise awareness about the truly life-saving gift of blood donation. While roughly half of all Canadians are eligible, Mr. Speaker, only 2% actually donate blood. This means that Ontario has to rely up to 83% of our plasma needs from paid donors in the US and across the world. To keep up the growing demand for blood, Canada needs around 100,000 more donors every year. As hospitals ramp up elective surgeries, it is clear that we need more and more neighborhood heroes to roll up their sleeves and donate blood. That is why, Mr. Speaker, I'm thrilled to share that our office will be organizing a community blood drive in my riding of Mississauga Malton on June 16th and 23rd. I will encourage every member of the community to make a difference. Let's keep the world beating. I would also like to acknowledge and thank staff and volunteers at Canadian Blood Services for their hard work and advocacy. Thank you for connecting patients with the gift of life. And to each and every single Ontarian who has donated blood, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for stepping up and saving lives. With that, Mr. Speaker, happy World Blood Donor Day. Thank you so much.
ਬਰੈਂਪਟਨ ਵੈਸਟ ਤੋਂ ਐਮਪੀਪੀ ਅਮਰਜੋਤ ਸੰਧੂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਮੁਸਲਿਮ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਤੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਮਲੇ ਸੰਬੰਧੀ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਪੂਰੇ ਓਨਟਾਰੀਓ ਵਾਸੀ ਇਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਪੀੜਿਤ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ तमाम ਮੁਸਲਿਮ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਤੋਂ ਮਾਫੀ ਮੰਗੀ ਤੇ ਦਾਅਵਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਭ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੇ ਭਾਵਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ। ਸੰਧੂ ਨੇ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਹੇਟ ਅਤੇ ਇਸਲਾਮੋਫੋਬੀਆ ਵਿਰੁੱਧ ਖੜਨ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਅਪੀਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ।
Thank you. Member statements. The member for Brampton West.
Thank you, Speaker. Last week on Sunday, June 6th, 4 members of a Muslim family were killed in a targeted and hate-motivated attack in London, Ontario. This family was going for a walk, but unfortunately couldn't make it home as they were all targeted because of their Muslim faith. We are shocked and horrified by this attack and that all Ontarians stand in solidarity with the victims' loved ones during this extremely difficult time. Speaker, it was an act of terrorism as this family's lives were taken in a brutal, cowardly and brazen act of violence targeted for their religion. From this august house, I would say sorry to my Muslim brothers and sisters in London and across the province for this insane and tragic act of violence. I would also like to ask my Muslim brothers and sisters to look over the shoulders and see that you're surrounded by love. This love is unwavering and unconditional, and it is with you always. We all grieve with Muslim community members in London and across the province because this is the pain they have known before. Through you, Speaker, I would say it is our duty to stand strong against hate. It is our duty to stand strong against Islamophobia. And it is our duty to stand strong against terror with faith, with love and a quest for justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
ਕੋਵਿਡ-19 ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਵਰਤਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਅਧਿਕਾਰਿਤ 2000 ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਆਰਜ਼ੀ ਪੈਟੀਓਜ਼ ਹੁਣ ਸੋਧੇ ਹੋਏ ਸੂਬਾਈ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਦੇ ਨਿਯਮਾਂ ਤਹਿਤ ਸਥਾਈ ਬਣਨ ਲਈ ਅਰਜ਼ੀ ਦੇ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਸੰਭਾਵੀ ਪੈਟੀਓਜ਼ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਥਾਨਕ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਸਮਰਥਨ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਜੋ ਸਥਾਨਕ ਬਾਇਲੋਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਪੂਰਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਅਰਜ਼ੀ ਪੈਟੀਓਜ਼ ਹਸਪਿਟੈਲਿਟੀ ਸੈਕਟਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਕਾਰੋਬਾਰਾਂ ਤੇ ਕਾਮਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਜੀਵਨ ਰੇਖਾ ਵਾਂਗ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਜਨਤਕ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਤੇ ਸੋਲਿਸਿਟਰ ਜਨਰਲ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਮਾਈਕ ਫਨਵਰਥ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਵਿਸਥਾਰਪੂਰਵਕ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਦੇਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਖੇਤਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਲੰਬੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੀ ਬਹਾਲੀ ਤੇ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਅੱਗੇ ਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਵਚਨਬੱਧ ਨੇ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਆਰਜ਼ੀ ਵਿਸਥਾਰਵਿਕ ਸੇਵਾ ਖੇਤਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਹਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੈਂਟਾਂ ਤੇ ਪੱਬਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਿਹਤ ਆਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੀ ਪਾਲਣਾ ਕਰਦਿਆਂ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਗਾਹਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਆਗਿਆ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ। ਦੱਸਦੇ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਰੀਰਕ ਦੂਰੀ ਤੇ ਅੰਦਰੂਨੀ ਖਾਣਾ ਖਾਣ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਖੇਤਰ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਨੇ। ਮੰਟੀਕਾ ਸਨਰਾਈਜ਼ ਕਿਬਾਨੀਜ਼ ਤੇ ਸਿਟੀ ਆਫ ਮੰਟੀਕਾ ਵੱਲੋਂ 4 ਜੁਲਾਈ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਡੀਪੈਂਡੈਂਸ ਡੇ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਸਵੇਰੇ 10 ਵਜੇ ਹੈਡਸ ਆਫ ਦਾ USA ਦੇ ਥੀਮ ਹੇਠ ਕੌਮਾਂਤਰੀ ਪਰੇਡ ਕੱਢੀ ਜਾਵੇਗੀ। ਕੋਰੋਨਾ ਮਹਾਮਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੋਕਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਿਯਮਾਂ ਤਹਿਤ ਇਹ ਪਰੇਡ ਕੱਢੀ ਜਾਵੇਗੀ, ਜਿਸ ਤਹਿਤ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਡਿਸਟੈਂਸਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਖਾਸ ਧਿਆਨ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਪਰੇਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਿਲ ਹੋਣ ਲਈ ਸਨਰਾਈਜ਼ ਕਿਬਾਨੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਰਜਿਸਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਵਰਲਡ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਬੁਲੇਟਿਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਹੋਰ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਟਾਈਮ TV ਨਾਰਥ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਆਗਿਆ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।